My fiancée said I was too available. Funny, she never complained when she needed saving. I was there through her layoffs, her panic attacks, her nights crying over nothing. The moment life got easier, she called my consistency clinginess. So I gave her what she wanted, silence. She said it right in the middle of a coffee shop in Austin. The kind with the reclaimed wood tables, Edison bulbs, and indie folk playing softly over tinny speakers. I had suggested we meet there because she liked the oat milk lattes and the corner table by the window. The table where the sun slanted just right, warming the edges of the worn leather bench. She didn't notice any of that today. She didn't notice me. You're just always around. I need space. Her words hit between the sips of my latte. Jamie stirred her own cup without even glancing up, as though the swirl of foam could hide the truth she refused to say out loud. Funny. She didn't think I was too available when I held her hand during panic attacks, whispering nonsense about clouds and gravity until her breath slowed. She didn't think I was too available when she called me at 11:47 p.m., shaking, sobbing about losing her job at the design studio, and I covered her rent with no questions. Not even a pause. Or when she broke down at 2 a.m. over nothing. Some imagined slight at a gallery showing, a bad day at the grocery store, and I just listened, letting her unload until the first threads of laughter returned. But now that life had stabilized, now that the rent was always paid on time and her anxiety was less raw and more controlled, that same consistency, the same devotion, had apparently become a flaw. I hadn't changed. She had. I just need to breathe, she said, her fingers tapping the side of her cup in nervous rhythm, the sound almost louder than her words. Her voice was flat, detached, careful, like she was testing it out in air before letting it hit me fully. I nodded slowly, taking a measured sip of my latte. I didn't argue. I didn't reach for her hand. I could see she expected a reaction, something desperate, maybe even apologetic. But I had learned my lessons in silent spaces and broken trust. Space is just silence you haven't learned to live with yet, I said. My tone was low, calm. I didn't want to provoke. I wanted her to understand. She smiled faintly, a quizzical tilt of her lips, but didn't get it. That wasn't about space. That was about running. I watched her, the subtle shake in her knee, the way she avoided my gaze and kept scanning the room, counting the empty chairs, checking her phone, listening for something she already had an answer to. She was looking for a reason to leave, and I suddenly understood I wasn't the problem. My reliability, my presence, my willingness to be there was the problem. I had been too available, too steady, too predictable. The irony made my chest tighten, a mix of anger and sorrow threading together in a tight knot. I thought about the little things. The time she locked herself out of her apartment in the rain, soaking her silk blouse and dripping water across the hallway carpet. I ran down 3 flights of stairs, soaked too, helped her inside without a word, smiling only because she was safe. Or the night her car broke down in the dead zone halfway to Houston. I drove 2 hours in silence, checking the oil, pumping the tires, refusing to complain even though my back ached. And we laughed about it once we were finally on the road again. Those moments had been small proofs of care, gestures she once treasured, and now, apparently, proof that I was suffocating. She's never said anything about the apartment being too small, or the way I left my bike in the hallway, or the half-finished painting leaning against the kitchen wall. She ignored that. The flaws I once thought mattered, the time I burned the risotto, the night I fell asleep mid-movie, didn't count. It was the way I was present, steady, always within reach. She wanted distance. She wanted me gone. I set my cup down carefully. I looked past her at the blurred faces of people moving through the coffee shop, their conversations punctuated by the hiss of the espresso machine, the clatter of spoons and plates. Life went on. Outside, a dog barked at a passing cyclist. The mundane, ordinary noise of existence carried on, and yet inside that bubble of quiet, time stretched. I realized I didn't need to chase her, didn't need to beg. She had chosen her flight. "You're running," I said quietly, not accusing, just stating. My words barely rose above the background hum. "Not from me, from yourself." Her eyes flicked up, and I saw the flash of recognition, quickly masked by defensiveness. She didn't deny it, but she also didn't argue. She said nothing. She smiled again, this time a little tighter, and pushed herself away from the table. The chair scraped sharply against the concrete floor, a harsh punctuation. I didn't move. I didn't follow. I let her leave. For the first time, I didn't go after her. For the first time, I let space mean what she said it did, and let it be enough for me to start thinking about what it would mean for my own life. The latte cooled in my hands, forgotten, as I let the quiet settle around me, absorbing the truth of it. Sometimes showing up isn't love. Sometimes it's exactly why they run. A week earlier, she'd humiliated me in front of her coworkers. It wasn't a major event, not something in the papers or viral online, but it cut precisely where it counted. The small, quiet shred of dignity I carried when I was around her. We were at her friend's birthday party, a rented loft above a downtown bar. The walls exposed brick and industrial beams, string lights zigzagging across the ceiling. I had arrived with a six-pack, timing it so I could hand her friends their first round, a quiet gesture of inclusion. I walked in, scanning the crowd. Music hummed low, mingled with laughter and the clink of glassware. Everything felt ordinary until I reached her circle and she introduced me. "Oh, this is Nick, my partner. He means well, he just worries too much." Her words tumbled out like a rehearsed line, a subtle jab camouflaged with politeness. I froze for half a second, the warmth of the room dulling to a cold static in my ears. Everyone laughed. Not a polite laugh. That sharp, knowing laugh that meant someone else's discomfort was entertainment. One guy, the loud one, always thinking volume equals charisma, leaned in, smirking. "So he's the guy who pays for your Uber rides, right?" The room shifted. People glanced at me, then at her, waiting for confirmation or denial. She didn't deny it. She smirked, eyes darting around to catch approval from her friends. "He doesn't mind helping, do you, Nick?" The question hung there, almost playful but with an edge. It was her little performance. I smiled. Not because it was funny, not at all. I smiled because I was too tired to defend myself again. Because I'd defended myself so many times before, in text threads, at family dinners, at brunches with her friends. Every time, it ended with the same result. Me framed as generous, naive, or pathetic, and her smiling, always smiling, at the subtle display of power. That night, after everyone drifted away, she fell asleep before I did. I stayed in the living room, the leftover warmth of the party buzzing faintly in the air. I brewed coffee in silence, measured out the beans, ground them slowly. The act of routine, of ritual, anchored me. I opened my notes app and typed one line, exactly one line, with deliberate care. "Stop explaining yourself to people who enjoy misunderstanding you." I didn't expect her to notice. She never did. She never looked for the undercurrent, the subtle cues, the way my eyes lingered a fraction too long on her when she rolled hers at a joke I'd already endured dozens of times. She slept in, the morning light creeping through the blinds and catching dust in streaks across her pale cheeks. I brewed 2 cups. She murmured thanks, barely awake, and returned to her phone, scrolling through notifications. Not a glance at me, not a hint of recognition for the emotional labor I'd invested in keeping the peace, in cushioning her ego from her friend's judgment. I drank my coffee in silence. I replayed the night in my head while cleaning up the counter, rinsing glasses, stacking empty plates. The laughter, the smirk, the way she held the spotlight while I disappeared into it. It was all a pattern. I'd seen it before, just smaller, more subtle. Birthday dinners, group hangouts, casual brunches. Every time, the same choreography. Me accommodating, her performing, others laughing at the cost of my dignity. I didn't leave that morning. I stayed, still patient, still reliable, still the guy she could count on when she wanted someone to hold her up. But I made a mental note. Patience wasn't endurance for its own sake. Patience had limits, lines drawn in the quiet moments between her laughter and the door slamming behind her. The lines had been crossed again. By the end of breakfast, I realized something crucial. Her need to control perception, to frame me as the one who owed her gratitude for basic decency, had nothing to do with me. It was about her narrative. And I had been complicit, not actively, not consciously, but by remaining too available, too predictable, too willing to absorb her whims without question. My own needs, my own presence, had become invisible until the day she called it a flaw. I glanced at my phone, a message from her already there, casual, unaware of the storm building in me. Thanks for helping with my friend's party. You're always so helpful. You should be grateful, you know? I stared at it. Not anger, not fury, not panic. Just clarity. That sentence, intended as praise, was a verdict. I was too available. My patience was a weapon against myself. And she had just delivered the final sentence. I put the phone down. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I didn't argue. I just let the silence stretch, heavy and deliberate. I let it remind me of what I'd been doing wrong all these years, showing up always in every sense she had defined, until it became exactly what she resented. And now, for the first time, I wondered what it would mean to disappear. She dropped it on a Monday night, casual as a weather report, like she was reading the forecast aloud and I was just supposed to nod along. The coffee shop and party and everything in between didn't seem to exist anymore. I signed up for a retreat in Colorado. No phones, no contact. I need to find myself. She said it like she was announcing a new yoga class she'd discovered, as though it was simple, benign, and entirely her right. The words echoed in my head after I put the phone down. I could almost hear the echoing mountains she imagined, the pine-scented air she would breathe, and the quiet she claimed she needed. I said nothing at first. Then I typed, paused, deleted, then typed again. Finally, "You're not running from noise, Jamie. You're running from silence." I didn't send it. Not yet. Not until I could decide whether it was consolation, confrontation, or simply observation. She rolled her eyes when I read it aloud in my head, the same way she rolled her eyes when she dismissed my coffee-making skills, my music choices, the small acts of care that had been invisible for years. 3 days later, I saw it. Instagram notifications glowing on my phone, a casual reminder that her version of finding herself came with filters, hashtags, and a carefully curated feed of serenity. Campfires, mountain views, early morning yoga poses with dew on her bare feet, and Jason, that same coworker from the party, the loud one, the one who had smirked at my Uber contributions, sitting beside her on a rock, chest pressed close enough to read the subtle lean of his smile. Caption: "Finally breathing again." I didn't comment. I didn't send a single message asking why, how, or when, because I already knew the answer. It wasn't about air or altitude. It wasn't about introspection. It was about replacing me in a way that made me unnecessary, expendable, almost invisible. Friends texted me. Group messages flashing on my phone like blinking warning lights. "Dude, talk to her. She's losing herself. You should help her. Don't just watch this happen." I ignored them, calmly, without explanation, because I knew better. My experience told me that when someone says they need to find themselves, they usually just want to get lost with someone else. And this wasn't about finding, it was about choosing who would fill the empty space they created. I replayed every interaction in my head. The coffee shop, the party, the way she laughed at my patience, how every act of my constancy, the late-night drives, the check-ins, the careful listening, had become exactly what she blamed me for. She hadn't left for peace. She had left to escape responsibility, to curate the narrative of her life as though I had been an inconvenient footnote, a prop in the story she wanted everyone to envy. I pictured her in the mountains, laughing easily, the wind tossing her hair while Jason leaned in close, whispering something I wasn't allowed to hear. The image was vivid, precise, a mental photograph. I didn't react with rage, didn't storm the airport, didn't flood her inbox with pleading texts. I simply acknowledged it, accepted it, and let it sharpen the clarity I had been cultivating since the coffee shop. This wasn't betrayal in the dramatic sense. This was a person revealing their priorities, their choices, their narrative. I made my own list. Late at night, after everyone else had logged off, I sat at my desk and wrote down what I had allowed myself to ignore. The repeated dismissals, the subtle humiliations, the emotional labor no one recognized but me. I cataloged kindnesses taken for granted, hours spent soothing anxiety that could have been mine, patience stretched like a rubber band until it threatened to snap. Each entry was a quiet marker, proof I had been present, reliable, committed, and proof that the world she was building had no room for me. By the end of the weekend, I stopped checking her social media. The Instagram feed could exist, the mountains could exist, Jason could exist. They were irrelevant to my next steps. I went to the gym, finished my bike restoration project, answered overdue emails, and started thinking about the apartment. The one she shared, but never fully occupied. The lease was in my name, the utilities my responsibility. She had abandoned the space physically and emotionally. That meant decisions could finally be made with cold clarity, without guilt, without negotiation. I realized something fundamental. Her space wasn't about introspection. It was about rewriting her life without considering my presence, without accounting for the history we'd shared. And I could do the same. I could step back, reclaim time, focus on what mattered to me, and prepare for the moment she returned. Only when she did, I would be operating on a different set of rules. The rules she had set in motion with her own words. Silence stretched, heavy but intentional, and I let it settle. This wasn't just about distance. It was about recalibration. It was about understanding that presence isn't a gift if it's unwanted, that devotion isn't meaningful if it's weaponized, and that sometimes the only way to preserve your dignity is to become unavailable. Not as a threat, not as a punishment, but as a natural consequence of the choices someone else has made. She came back a month later. Tanner, louder, hair sun-streaked from Colorado light, a faint citrus scent replacing the perfume I used to buy her every birthday. There was a new tattoo on her wrist, a thin black infinity symbol looping cleanly around the bone. Inside the lines, in small script, was the name Jason. "It's infinity," she said, smiling like it was a spiritual discovery. "It means growth, continuity, eternal connection." I stared at it for a beat too long. Connection to what? She didn't answer right away. She just twirled her wrist under the kitchen light, watching it gleam. "You don't understand," she said finally, voice gentle, rehearsed. "I've grown. I see life differently now." She dropped her duffel on the floor like it was normal to come back unannounced, like no time had passed. She started talking about energy, alignment, freedom, and vibrations, words she'd never used before Colorado. She said the trip opened her eyes, that we had been stuck in patterns, that I was stuck in logic. While she spoke, I noticed her tan lines, the new silver rings, the beaded bracelet clearly bought from some retreat gift shop. Her phone kept lighting up with notifications, a flood of hearts and mountain emojis. I didn't ask from whom. When I mentioned the practical things, the overdue bills, the rent I'd been covering alone, the notice from the utility company, she smiled pityingly, as though I were missing the point of existence. "Money," she said, "is just energy that comes and goes. You have to stop clinging to it." I looked at her evenly. "Then maybe energy can pay the power company," I said. She blinked. "You just don't get me." That line landed like a stamp across 3 years of shared mornings, shared struggles, the late-night phone calls, the months of emotional triage. I'd spent years getting her, learning how to talk her down when panic hit, learning which silences she needed and which ones meant danger. I got her better than she got herself. But now that she'd found new vocabulary and a man who liked the same mountain air, I was obsolete. She started crying. Not small tears, loud ones, the kind that filled a room. She said I'd gone cold, that I was judgmental, that my calm was suffocating her. She called me transactional for mentioning money, said I was missing the essence of things. I listened quietly. I didn't interrupt, because I realized something mid-argument. There was nothing to win here. She had already rewritten the script. In her story, she was the enlightened traveler. I was the controlling skeptic who didn't support her journey. Her tears kept coming. She said, "You used to care." "I still do," I answered. "Just not at the expense of self-respect." That sentence stopped her. She stared, eyes glassy, mouth parting like she wanted to respond but couldn't find the right angle. I felt an unexpected calm slide over me, like cool water after a long fever. I stepped outside. The evening air was thick with honeysuckle and distant barbecue smoke from a neighbor's yard. The porch light hummed softly. Crickets started their chorus. For a moment, I stood barefoot on the wooden boards, feeling the rough grain beneath my heels, and breathed in. It was the first real breath I'd taken in months. Clean, unfiltered by anxiety or performance. Inside, I could still hear her pacing, muttering to herself about closed-minded people and negative energy. I didn't follow. I let her words dissolve into the night. For once, I didn't feel the pull to fix it, to soothe, to explain. I just watched the sky turn darker, the stars pushing through the haze above the city, and realized peace wasn't abstract. It was measurable. In breaths, in distance, in silence. Behind me, the door creaked open. "Nick," she said softly, "can we talk?" "About what?" "About us." "There is no us to discuss," I said without anger. "There's you, figuring out who you want to be, and me, finally remembering who I am." She sniffled, tried to say something, then closed the door again. The click sounded final. I stayed on the porch until the air cooled and the mosquitoes started biting. The calm didn't leave. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't the villain or the caretaker or the explanation. I was simply a man standing in the quiet, breathing in his own life again. A few weeks later, she showed up at my office. No call, no text, no warning. Just tears and desperation spilling through the glass doors of reception. I saw her reflection before I heard her voice. Shoulders hunched, hair messy, makeup streaked. That infinity tattoo faintly smudged like even permanence had started to fade. "Nick," she said, breath-catching. "They let me go." Her voice cracked on go, and every head in the open-plan room turned, curiosity disguised as concern. She took another step forward, clutching a wrinkled tote bag like it was a lifeline. Jason disappeared. He blocked me. I don't have anywhere to stay. The office went quiet. Keyboards stilled. Someone in accounting pretended to need coffee just to listen better. My manager's door was open. I could feel eyes flicking between us like it was a scene from a show. "Please, Nick," she whispered, shaking. "Just one night. I'll figure it out after. I just need somewhere to breathe." For a second, a single second, the old instinct rose up. The reflex to fix, to shelter, to rescue. The same reflex that had me paying her rent, sitting through breakdowns, apologizing for things I hadn't done. But then I felt the steady hum of the fluorescent lights above, the weight of my coworkers' stares, and the quiet certainty that this was a test of everything I'd finally learned. I opened my desk drawer slowly. Inside was a small manila envelope I'd prepared weeks ago, just in case. The final pieces of her I still possessed. A necklace she'd left on my nightstand, her spare apartment key, and the flash drive labeled Design Portfolio Final. I'd kept them because I knew this moment would come, that eventually, she'd circle back to the safety she once mocked. I stood and handed her the envelope. "These are the things you left behind," I said, voice even. "That's all that's left to give." Her eyes widened, confusion mixing with disbelief. "Nick, please. I have nowhere else to go." "Your night ended a long time ago," I said quietly. The sentence landed harder than I expected. Not cruel, just final. She stared at me, lips trembling, and then something inside her broke. The envelope slipped from her hand, scattering the contents across the polished floor. Silver chain glinting under LED light, keys clinking like punctuation marks to an argument already over. She bent to grab them but stopped halfway, shaking her head. "You're heartless," she said through tears. "You didn't even try to understand." "I did," I replied softly. "For years." She covered her face and fled. The automatic doors whooshed open, swallowed her sobs, and closed again. The office exhaled, awkward silence settling like dust. Someone coughed. A colleague mumbled something about boundaries, another about bravery. I just sat down, reopened my spreadsheet, and tried to steady my hands. Later, after everyone had gone home, I replayed the moment alone under the pale buzz of my monitor. Part of me wanted to chase her, to make sure she got home safe, to offer one more night of shelter, but I stopped. I'd built too much of my life on emergency rescues. I was always the soft landing, the spare key, the person she called when consequences arrived. It wasn't compassion anymore. It was enabling. Around midnight, my phone lit up. Unknown number, but I knew. Jamie, you're heartless. You didn't even try to understand. My thumb hovered over the screen. The old urge stirred again. To apologize, to soothe. Instead, I typed one line, deliberate, precise, and pressed send. Me, I just stopped being your emergency exit. The typing bubbles appeared, then vanished. Silence. I put the phone face down on the desk and leaned back in my chair, staring at the city lights outside my window. For the first time, the skyline looked still, not lonely. I realized boundaries weren't walls. They were doors that only opened one way, when both people respected them. She'd spent years learning how to escape. I was finally learning how to stay put. I locked my phone, turned off the monitor, and let the office fall into darkness. The echo of her voice faded. What replaced it wasn't triumph or guilt, just an even calm. The kind that comes when you finally understand that saving someone who doesn't want to be saved is just another way of losing yourself. A month passed. The days stretched into one another. The same rhythm of work, errands, and quiet evenings in my apartment. I didn't hear from her. Not texts, not calls, not social media posts. The silence wasn't heavy at first. It was strange, almost alien. But then it became a texture, a tangible presence that settled in the corners of the rooms I moved through, filling spaces she used to occupy with her noise, her laughter, her relentless needs. Word got around, whispers from mutual friends, neighbors, even a barista, that she was sleeping in her car near an old gas station outside town. They didn't ask if I cared. I didn't volunteer. It wasn't my problem, not anymore. I let the information slide past like wind through the trees. Inconsequential. And then one night my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the voicemail icon. I didn't want it, didn't need it, but curiosity tugged just enough. The voice was unmistakable, fragile and familiar. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how hard silence hits when no one's there to fill it. I listened to the message twice, then deleted it without a response. The urge to justify, to explain, to open the door just a crack. The one I'd habitually left open for her in every storm, every breakdown, every midnight crisis, wasn't there. The calm had taken its place. I felt a strange satisfaction in letting her words hang in the empty air, unanswered. The next morning, the mail arrived. A thin, nondescript envelope with no return address. I opened it slowly, almost ceremoniously. Inside was the engagement ring I'd given her 2 years ago, nestled in a velvet box, along with a short note, written in her familiar, looping handwriting. You were the stability I took for granted. Thank you for the silence. I held the ring for a moment, feeling the cool weight of it in my palm. This was the closure she could offer, the tangible acknowledgement of what I had been, and what she had finally understood. I put the ring in the top drawer of my desk, next to my spare keys. Not hidden, not locked away, just contained, inert, a reminder of what had been and the life I'd reclaimed. I brewed coffee, letting the beans grind slowly, the scent filling the apartment in a gentle rhythm. I drank it deliberately, small sips, savoring warmth and flavor without distraction. There was no phone in my hand, no social media scrolling, no constant tether to the noise of expectations, obligations, or guilt. Just quiet, just presence, just me. For the first time in years, I didn't check my phone. I didn't replay old conversations in my head. I didn't scroll for confirmation that she was alive, safe, or miserable. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of the choices I had made, of the boundaries I had enforced, of the life I had quietly, insistently reclaimed. Being too available isn't weakness. It isn't a flaw or a misstep. Sometimes it's the opposite. A demonstration of clarity, of knowing your limits, of recognizing when giving, accommodating, or explaining stops serving anyone but the other person. Sometimes it's understanding that stepping back, leaving space, and refusing to fill it is the only form of care that matters for you. I sat at the window, coffee in hand, watching the city lights flicker through the dusk. Traffic hummed softly below. Distant voices carried faintly on the wind. I didn't feel lonely. I didn't feel incomplete. I felt steady, balanced, free. And finally, in the quiet that wasn't mine to fill anymore, I realized that sometimes the loudest statement isn't made with words, or tears, or pleas. Sometimes it's simply walking away, stepping outside, and letting silence speak the truth. That your presence is valuable, your attention is earned, and your life is yours to protect. I finished my coffee, set the mug in the sink, and let the stillness settle around me. For the first time in years, the world wasn't demanding from me, pulling at me, testing me. It existed, and so did I, in perfect alignment. Being too available isn't weakness. It's discernment. It's patience. It's finally knowing when to walk away and when to shut the hell up. And I did.